Good evening, and thank you for joining on this discussion about gender politics, power relations among men and women. And thank you for partaking in this year's spring lectures. It's such a relevant topic, the issue of gender politics, gender relations. This year, I think there was particular emphasis on gender-based violence because of the lockdown and how certain factors contributed to that. But it is really a big problem in South Africa, and so I think we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about obviously gender roles and how can we create equality whilst distinguishing between gender roles. And I would like to open it up to our panel this evening, and I'm very glad that you all came. On the end, we have Shelly, next to her is Zuko, Christine, Yanni, and Yvette. And you're all in professional careers, and so you're all engaging on in places of work where these things do play out. And so, what is your take on how do we create gender equality whilst distinguishing between gender roles?
I think the first thing that we need to look at and do is that we need to realize that men and women, specifically women, can do the same jobs as men. I look at it from a cultural aspect as well, in a sense that we need to try and take away the cultural aspects where we objectify or we put women in a specific box. Within the corporate world, it's evident that women are thriving, women are doing well, that they're coming up, and that most jobs that men can do, women are doing. And it's just about giving them that space, and that freedom. I mean, it's a system, the system that we're actually talking about is a system that has been, run by men for a very long time. Women have been placed, on the side, thinking that they only belong maybe in the kitchen and cooking. But this generation, it has changed. Women are taking up positions and women are realizing that them too, within the corporate industries, they can make a difference, just like men can do.
I think we also need to have open, honest, and raw conversations about gender equality in the workplace, but also globally as well, and also to remove the gender roles. So a lawyer is generally assumed that it's a man, secretary is in a support role as a woman, same with a doctor, nurse, and a pilot and a steward. So I think we need to remove away, it's a man's job, it's a man's world. That connotation actually needs to be removed. It's a woman's world and it's a man's world. It's our world, equally. And like Zuko says, women can do the same job as a man. There's no difference. And also,
and as also, men can do the same job that a woman can do. So, I mean, we often see the supporting roles as being less than, or a stay-at-home mom as not being a good enough job, whereas men can still do those jobs as well. It's not just these certain women can come up because they're smart enough and they fought for it, and these women need to stay down because, well, who's going to look after the kids? And they should appreciate having that job, but no man necessarily wants to do that job. And so I think it has to go both ways. As much as women can do jobs that men can do, men can definitely do jobs that women can do too.
I also think we need to go back perhaps into our schools, into our homes, our families, workplaces, perhaps policies, that sort of thing, and maybe look at sort of moving away from those gender norms and what we were taught. I think, and changing our language and changing our mindsets as well about the gender roles.
I'm just wondering if sometimes we don't place too much value on or equate equality to sameness. Because I do think that men and women on average differ in in interests or like let's say a basic difference is that typically women are more interested in people and typically men are more interested in things. And so I'm wondering if we can respect that and kind of just give everyone freedom of choice, like really do go into the career that you want to go into, how then there do we create equality? Let's say that more teachers are females. How can we raise the status of teachers in our society if it continues to be female?
So it's not necessarily representative of inequality, maybe just of interest. Is that what you're saying?
To an extent, I think in some of the sectors where we can see there's a clear distinction, but I know in certain sectors, again, let's say with lawyers, where you may have equal number of men and women, there like subtle discrimination and sexism really is a challenge and a problem still.
Because I want to sort of pick up from the idea of culture. Because I think in culture we have clear distinction of particular roles. And are those roles, do they contribute to inequality, or are some of those roles to be acknowledged and to be honored within particular cultural contexts?
That's a very interesting question. With the cultural aspect, it's very debatable. I myself view that, look at the Nguni tribes, they are very strict when you look at the culture as, women must be respectful towards men. A woman basically needs to be submissive and treat the man in a certain way. Culture does contribute, I won't lie. Culture does play a very big role, and depending from what type of household you're coming from, if I speak for myself, I was from a household where it was not too, if I can say, cultural. My parents, both of them, respected each other in a sense that, if one can do one thing, the other will do the next thing. So it goes to how the individual as well grew up. If you grew up in a household where your dad was the one that was, bringing in the money, mom was always in the kitchen, and you always see that, and you're always told that, then automatically in your mind, it's already in there. I've got friends where, they will tell me, Zuba, a woman's job is to, they must provide, they must cook for you. If they don't cook for you, then they're not a woman, or they're not taking care of you, if I can say. Which you ask yourself that question, where do you get that mentality from? It comes from where either you were brought up and your cultural beliefs. I believe that culture changes, and I think that now looking at the generation that we are in, culture is slowly changing, and there are men that are now, seeing women for their potential and who they are, rather than, you cannot be in an office and work. You need to be at home, I'll bring the money.
Well, I think we're in a society where you can't. I mean, in this day and age, generally both parents need to work in order to send your kids to a good school, to have the good house, to, feed your children, and in other aspects help your other family members through whatever is going through. Everybody has to work. But what we're seeing on that aspect is that there is still this understanding that a woman can still go and get a job and be the CEO, but she's still got to come home and do all of these female roles at home. And it's not equal in the home space. So we've seen a shift and a move in corporate space because government has dictated it and said there will be X amount of women that get jobs for whatever reason. But when they come back home, they've almost had to become like superwomen. I mean, as you were talking, and I know that's not your view, but it's views that you've heard from men, I feel very sorry for my husband. Because if his understanding is of a woman must come home and do the laundry and cook and clean and the rest, he's not getting that from me. So I don't know what happens when he gets to the family events and they're like, yeah, does your wife do? No, she doesn't. In fact, when we go to those family events, all the women tend to go to the kitchen anyway because it is dictated by the family. Nobody says it, but it's where you go. And even within those ranks, like you see it, they're not necessarily happy to be in that space, but they do it because it's expected. And I don't know whether that's the right or the wrong thing.
And that's the point of the cultural aspect as well, as to, you brought up a very good point when you're saying that you go to a family event, especially in African cultures. I've seen it as well. Women will be, in the kitchen, be outside drinking the beer or whatever. And you're saying that, a lot of women, you said that like, you see they're not comfortable, but because they're in that position, they have to conform with it. And that's why I'm saying that culture, it's for me, it's one of the number one factors that we need to look at in order to address the situation as well. It starts at home, and then you can take it outside as well.
So there's obviously, whether we like it or not, some systemic factors that's contributing to certain, I would say even gender objectification, that can reduce or take power away from especially women.
It's like suppressing it,
And so gender-based violence is basically the extreme of already preceding suppression and some form of abuse. But when we talk about the objectification of genders, my question would be then is how do men then respond in addressing this humanitarian problem of trying to equalize or trying to empower or to alleviate or try to address or answer or show respect or to the situation that is happening in over weekends in households. Well, maybe we can, Christine, what do you think?
So my thoughts are, I think men need to look at masculinity. I think we need to look at healthy masculinity. What is healthy masculinity? I think all of us, both male and female, we need to look, but I suppose more men, they need to look more at their beliefs of women. And in fact, even society, what is society, or what have we learned from society that has sort of taught us this is how we view men and women, or this is how men should be portrayed.
So I heard an interesting argument the other day about toxic masculinity, and it said that maybe it's masculinity isn't actually toxic, it's just lacking. And I think it comes from, I heard some stats the other day that 70% of children in the Eastern Cape do not know who their father is. And in those spaces, it's so female dominated. Teachers are usually women. Children grow up in single mother households. And I think boys really lack like good examples of men in their lives that treat women right, that give women recognition for their gender role, then if it is even cultural.
Actually, I mean, how would you like men to be brought into this conversation?
I think, once again, open and raw conversations, and I think also men need to be comfortable enough to correct men as well on their bad behaviour. So if a man passes a derogatory comment to a woman walking past, his friend should actually feel comfortable enough to say, that's not cool. Don't bring a woman down like that, or catcalling, or even in the workspace. They need to be comfortable enough, and I don't want to say manly enough, but just comfortable enough in himself to say, Zuko, that's not cool. We don't talk like that. And then also in the workplace, I think you need to have equal play, which is obviously, it's a global phenomenon that you've got male and female counterparts in the same roles, But then when you do a comparison to their salaries, because it's a man is getting paid much more than a woman. And those stats, and obviously it's coming out now globally that those stats need to, or the stats of the companies are coming out to say, well, we are addressing the problem. There's transformation, there's transparency. It's slow, but it is a start. And people need to start having those conversations as well.
And so we need to obviously ask then, how can the Bible be brought into the conversation? The conversation of how can we develop our theological understanding of the problem that we're facing right now, dealing with such issues.
For me, Christianity is love. This gender role, men must do this, women must do this, is very man-made. It's very, come through society, it's how society is developed. Each role should be how it should be done. And actually it doesn't have to be that way. God is love, Jesus is love, and also God and Jesus is equality as well. And love is unconditional as well.
I think also looking at it, we also need to look at the life of Jesus within the Bible. That's very important in a sense that we have this man that conversed with everyone. This man who in those days women were viewed as second-class citizens. For me, I can say that, Jesus didn't see male or female, but saw humanity, humans, for the mere fact that he was able to call people into order for wanting to stone a woman who committed adultery. For the mere fact we're talking about a man who was able to speak to a Samaritan woman, speak to a woman and heal her who had the issue of blood, and the tone in which he did it in. He didn't degrade them, but he showed compassion on them, and that's the things that we need to learn, is that, as Julie said, the essence of our Christian faith is about love. The essence of our Christian faith is about treating each other equally, and when you look at the Bible, maybe there are controversial books in the Bible where, things are done to women, but we also need to look at it from a point of view that there are verses and books in the Bible where we have women that have played roles, we have women that have been in leadership positions, we look at, for example, we look at people like Ruth, we look at, women like Mary as well, and we need to try and teach more of that. It shouldn't be a thing where only come the month of August or only come the month of Christmas where we remember Mary, but we need to remember in a sense that women contributed, and women played a significant role within our Christian faith of who we are.
What do you say about that?
Well, I think there are a few aspects that, this is a very close topic to my heart, but I think that we have to read those readings in context. I think that's the first thing. The Bible should never be used in any context to oppress anybody. So when we do use verses in the Bible that says a woman shall not stand and preach in the synagogue, and we still hold that against her in the year 2020, we need to look at that in the place that it was written. We need to understand it from where it was written and not use it in the context of today, because as Zuko's pointed out, well, they weren't just second-class citizens, they were seen as half human because they weren't men. There are a whole lot of aspects and cultural elements that were written in the Bible that we have to take into context today when we read it. But like it says that we can have slaves, we've thrown that out and said, no, we shouldn't have slaves because that's bad. We shouldn't be oppressing women and using this book to do it either. And I think when it comes to this conversation, Jesus' examples are so prevalent. He did. He broke all the boundaries. He broke all the rules. And he's like, I'm going to speak to women, even if they're not part of my tribe or my family, which was completely taboo. We have to be doing those things. And he did make them leaders. There were women disciples. And we see them even through Paul's times, where they started churches and they grew communities and they spread Christianity. And we tend to forget those women, except when it comes Yvette is allowed to preach in church, and then she brings them up, or other feminist theologians speak, because it's the forgotten voices in the Bible.
I think another part where the Bible is really important in this conversation, especially with regards to suppression and violence against women, is that over and over again in the Bible we are called to speak up about injustices and to care for those who don't have someone to take care of them, especially, let's say, women who've been abused, who don't feel safe in their homes where they are supposed to feel safe. And so, yeah, as Christians, we really have that duty to look after the vulnerable in our society.
Yeah.
And just to add on to what Shelia said about just Jesus' love and us loving each other unconditionally, Romans 12 and verse 10 came to mind to me, which is love one another warmly as brothers and sisters and be eager to show respect for one another. So I feel that we should be able to show respect for one another and for each other's strengths as well as each other's weaknesses.
So and I think we should conclude by a final question in that, what does the future look like? What does the future hold for this country in terms of gender equality, but how do you see the future for yourself?
I think for the country, I think we're still on a long journey. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of everyone coming together to support one another. Upliftment of women, of men as well, all together. I think we're still on a long road. There has been a lot that's been done already, but just from what I've heard on webinars that I've listened to over the past couple of weeks, there has been a bit of progress that's been made, but there's a lot more that needs to be made.
I think there's also a lot of conscientizing to be done as well. I feel as though we are making strides forward, but it's at a small rate. If you look at it, I mean, you switch on the news, you hear news of GBV happening, and you ask yourself that, but we have these campaigns that are going on against gender-based violence, and yet we're still having high numbers of women that are dying, and I think it's about, us men taking a stand, us men saying enough is enough. Us men saying we will protect our women, we will protect our sisters, because, if we lose them, who will we have? And it starts from there. It starts from us introspecting and looking at ourselves as individuals, from homes, looking at our characters. It's also what Chili said earlier on, to say that if you see your friend or your brother or someone doing something to a woman, you should be able to say, no, stop doing that. A lot of us men keep quiet. Your friend will come and tell you that, hey, dude, I cheated and I did A, B, C, D. You will condone that behavior. And it's small things like that, that need to be addressed. So we can have all these campaigns, but I think the bigger picture needs to be brought back at home.
And I think in that sense, trying to be positive, my dad often says that when he looks at our generation, my sister's husband, and dads nowadays are much more hands-on and contributing to the household than their generation, let's say, because usually both people have to work. So I do think there is a positive shift. Of course, that's maybe only in one part of the society. And I think in examples like that, the idea is really let's just work together. We don't have to be enemies. We're not competition for each other. Let's just dominate this thing called life together.
Well, again, I would like to thank you for the discussion that we had. The systemic issues in the world remain, but it's like conversations like these that small changes, maybe large changes, can be made in terms of maybe somebody's listening to this, and it could influence even policy, or behavior in the workplace, or in schools, or in interpersonal relationships right now, and so these conversations have to be made, and the church, as we've just said, we have a role to play, and of course we can gather around the scriptures, and it's from there we gain inspiration, and we have to wrestle with it and say, what was it like for them, what were the contexts, what were the issues, and we can take that with the guidance of God's Spirit, come to a closer expression of God, who is love, and get to that place of harmony in the intent of living in such harmony as God created both female and male, of both revealing the image of God. And so I would like to thank you all again